Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis News from September 12th to the 18th. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. There's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place, so you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you feel ready if you wish to do so. We're going to start with this timely development from the Dales report, as a Nevada judge rules cannabis can no longer be classified as a Schedule I drug. Now, unfortunately, it's not the Supreme Court and a judge out of Nevada, but still this is an important precedent in laws. This ruling could be used as a potential argument in future cases that go towards trying to get cannabis descheduled at the federal level. And so, a Nevada judge has ruled on a closely followed lawsuit that could have precedent-setting influence on a federal level. He determined that the Nevada Board of Pharmacy can no longer list cannabis as a Schedule I drug. It was a clear victory for the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU of Nevada, which filed the lawsuit back in April of 2022. So on Wednesday, District Judge Joe Hardy Jr., thank you, Judge Joe Hardy Jr., sided with the ACLU's argument that cannabis has an accepted medical use because voters amended the Constitution in 2000 to legalize medical cannabis. He ordered the Board of Pharmacy to remove cannabis from the list of Schedule I drugs, although the timeline for such action is unclear. So again, doesn't mean a whole lot, but an important precedent in terms of law. And so there's more to the story. You can grab the link below if you wanted. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but you can pause to read for a bit more info here. But again, a big development that could potentially be used in the future to make better arguments for obviously common sense solution and policy going forward. And so with that, we just wanted to share this one from Jeremy Burke, who writes for Business Insider Trading. The federal government's decision to classify cannabis as a Schedule I controlled substance without accepted medical utility is arguably irrational, but it is not unconstitutional, according to the Second Circuit Appeals Court. I disagree, I call bullshit, but regardless, this is another example of someone trying to fight the status quo and getting the fact that cannabis is still a Schedule I substance deemed unconstitutional because clearly it has medical value, it's accepted for medical legally in 40 plus states, and it unfortunately denies many Americans access to a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative when the status quo is maintained and cannabis is a Schedule I. And so, just more on this article, the case is US of A versus Green. Just to give you a little run-through, judges for the U.S. Court of Appeals rejected the defendant's argument, opinioning the Act's scheduling criteria are largely irrelevant to our constitutional review because the rational basis test asks only whether Congress could have any conceivable basis for including cannabis in the strictest schedule. You will have to question and wonder what sort of influence Big Pharma has had all along, and if that's had any role in the fact that they wanted to put it in the strictest ruling. But regardless, because there are plausible considerations that could have motivated Congress's scheduling of cannabis, we conclude that its classification does not violate the plaintiff's due process or equal protection rights, which is, again, bullshit. Another example of rights being denied to Americans that they should have had all along. And so more here if you wanted to read through, but just to summarize, Normal's Deputy Director Paul Armentano said the ruling is disappointing but not unanticipated, so obviously to be expected. And while it may be unfortunate that this ruling might have happened before the Nevada judge deemed the current status quo with cannabis in the Schedule I is unconstitutional, again, it is good to have that Nevada judge ruling, so that could be potentially used in the future as an argument. But he acknowledged that the decision is consistent with those of other federal courts that have similarly refused to strike down the Schedule I status of cannabis as unconstitutional, finding that the rational basis review does not permit the federal courts to second-guess Congress's decision. So again, it's just this vicious circle and this loop of the courts sending it to Congress, Congress not doing anything, then people calling on the courts, courts sending it to Congress, Congress not doing anything. Very annoying, but getting closer and closer every day. He added, judges have repeatedly ruled that it is the responsibility of federal lawmakers, not the courts, to repeal the federal prohibition of cannabis. And yeah, we would hope that they do their job and that they weren't being paid and lobbied by certain influences not to do that. But rather than expect relief from the federal courts, citizens need to continue to pressure their federally elected officials to repeal this admittedly irrational and destructive policy. So very unfortunate. I still do hope that there could be a sleeper decision that cannabis gets deemed unconstitutional and they force Congress to change the laws. And while I'm certainly not holding my breath for that, wouldn't it be awesome if Clarence Thomas did that for the American people, as he's talked about in the past? So unfortunately, do have to share this dose of reality with you to highlight the stigma that cannabis has always faced all along and why the system, or why the status quo perpetuates itself, but happy to highlight that we have this Nevada precedent that can be used as a potential argument in future cases to help the cause. And so with that, wanted to share this one from Marijuana Moment. A new bill, apparently small cannabis growers could sell directly to consumers across state lines under new congressional bill. We want to make sure that these small operations have a chance to compete and succeed. And so hilarious comment down here from Jeff Korf. So thanks, Jeff, for this one. This bill is the legislative equivalent of trying to become an Olympic sprinter before you can walk. Very well said. And so just to highlight a little bit of this bill, so this is the story, essentially direct-to-consumer models have historically benefited small farmers in traditional agricultural markets, allowing them to bring their products to market without going through third-party distributors or retailers that would require additional spending. And so the SHIP Act would extend that marketing opportunity to the cannabis sector, but only after cannabis is federally descheduled. And so this is very interesting. Could this be foreshadowing of something to come in the effect of descheduling cannabis in some sort of way? I hope. Probably not. Probably more propaganda to keep us chasing along. But regardless, just wanted to share this. Not going to go through the whole thing because obviously it doesn't mean much now until something happens. But the link is below if you wanted to go through this and wondering if this could be something that could be added to an incremental Safe Plus. I wouldn't think so. I don't think any Republicans would want to get behind this as well, but just interesting to share. And so with that, Marijuana Moment highlighting cannabis banking sponsors step up reform push as industry holds over 100 lobbying meetings in Congress this week. So seems like the lobbying push is back on, which we like to hear at least because this is support for SAFE as opposed to the status quo. Senate leadership works to finalize a package of cannabis reforms that is expected to include banking provisions. The bipartisan and bicameral sponsors of the Secure and Fair Enforcement Safe Banking Act say it's time to take action on the House-passed standalone legislation. As the National Cannabis Industry Association ramped up its advocacy for the bill this week, bringing in more than 100 stakeholders for 2 days of lobbying on Capitol Hill, involving more than 100 meetings with lawmakers and staff to drive home the point that they want to see the Safe Banking Act enacted in 2022. So better to have this happening now, and it's a big push before November than to not have it, right? And this bill has passed the House in some form 7 times now, but it's stalled in the Senate under both Democratic and Republican, basically big pharma-controlled leadership, unfortunately. But at a press conference on Wednesday, sponsors of the standalone banking bill reiterated the urgency of enacting reform this session, reiterating the public safety imperative of giving the cannabis industry access to the financial system. Just the common sense. Get the cash off the streets, treat them like any other business. It's going to benefit everybody. Jobs, tax revenue, all that. Senator Jeff Merkley of Oregon talked about examples of violent crimes targeting cannabis businesses and workers, as well as the bipartisan support of the standalone legislation. Yada, yada. We've heard this all before, but hopefully this can mean something this time around. It's a political positive. It's good policy and good politics, he said. All true. So we're here today to say it's way past time to get the safe banking bill done. It's just how do they go about getting it done? It's still a when out if scenario, just tricky when it comes to politics and all the factors involved. But he also outlined additional provisions under consideration to build upon the financial services reform as part of the broader package that's being called Safe Banking Plus. Now, don't take this from me. I got this from Todd and Brady and many of the sources I follow on Twitter, but we've been saying this all along. Could there be a potential Safe Banking Plus alternative that, gives us what we need? And so just going to leave this here. You can grab the link below if you wanted to go through this, but the momentum is building, and so we do love to see that. Well, we've got this one from Todd Harrison, so thanks, Todd, for sharing. Majority of Republicans support variety of cannabis reforms. New poll finds, and this is a poll from the National Cannabis Roundtable, as GOP congressman talks bipartisan steps. So I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but if you wanted to read through a little bit more deeper detail, as 76% of those polled agree don't interfere with states, which is likely along the lines of also minimizing as much federal overhang as possible, while 56% agreed with expungements in legal states, and then 73% agreed with treating the industry the same as others. And so obviously the views are shifting, and many people are agreeing that cannabis should be treated like anything else. So the normalization takes a lot of time, but we're getting closer. And so some states news, wanted to share this one from MJ Biz Daily. Vermont issues first licenses for recreational cannabis retailers. And so another small state that's going in the proper direction of legalizing for adult use, one slow step at a time, as Vermont issued its first retail adult use cannabis business licenses with at least one store aimed at opening October 1st. And so that is less than 2 weeks away, 2 weeks away, but good job, Vermont, for getting this started. According to the VT Digger, the State Cannabis Control Board gave retail recreational permits to Mountain Girl Cannabis in Rutland and Flora Cannabis in Middlebury, and gave granted permissions for Sarah's Med, formerly Champlain Valley Dispensary in South Burlington, to transition from medical to adult use cannabis sales. So it seems like that's 3 dispensaries in total so far. And so a little bit more information here if you wanted to pause to read, but good to see Vermont getting this ball rolling slowly but surely. Well, we've got this one on Michigan. So thanks, Todd, for sharing what Beacon has to say on Michigan. And so basically highlighting Michigan legal sales up 10%. As we got the latest information in, the Michigan Cannabis Regulatory Agency has reported the legal sales totaled $208 million in August, down just 1% month over month from the record $210 million in July, I believe, and up 26% year over year from $166 million in August 2021. So love to see a lot of people still spending money on on legal cannabis in Michigan, which is great. So you can pause to read a bit more there. We got this one from the Office of Medical Cannabis Use highlighting Florida for this past week. So we take a look at dispensaries approved from September 12th to the 16th. We got one from Green Dragon opening a new location in Tallahassee. And if we look at the qualified patient count this past week, we can see it increased to 751,311. So we have surpassed the 750,000 mark. And so this increase also represents, it adds 1,707 patients week over week. So still a good amount, down from the average 2,000 that we like to see outside of the summer months, but have to factor in that this is also over Labor Day weekend. So we'll keep our eyes peeled for next week to see if they jump back up over the 2,000 mark when it's no longer a long weekend. And so with that, we can see dispensations from September 9th to the 15th for all the MSOs listed in the state of Florida. We can see the number of dispensary locations that they have in operation, and we can see week over week the number of milligrams of THC sold, number of milligrams of CBD sold, and number of ounces of smokable flower. And so this is a great resource that I do feature in every Sunday video, as we get this information basically every Saturday. But fortunately, we've got Pierre Gilles to make an easily digestible Florida flower market share comp sheet, so you can easily see who is leading in market share in terms of the MSOs in the state. And so it is updated as of the 16th of September. So a few days ago, we got Trulieve number 1 still, Curaleaf number 2, Liberty Health Sciences backed by Air Wellness as number 3, Move backed by Verano number 4, and then Certera Wellness, Grow Healthy, Fluent, and Sunnyside. So you can pause to read. But again, we can see Trulieve's market share slowly shrinking week over week, which is not ideal, but you know, that's why they are helping the push with 10 million so far in donations to get that legalization for adult use on the ballot for Florida in 2024. And so with that, MJ Biz Daily, we move over to California, as apparently in November, dozens of California cities, counties could okay new recreational cannabis markets. And so we love to hear this, obviously, as more recreational and legal outlets in California would be more beneficial to help combat the illicit market that thrives because there's not enough legal dispensaries, to properly supply the demand. And so a little bit more information, not going to spend a whole lot of time, but just going to summarize. More than 24 California cities and counties could establish new cannabis markets through ballot measures in November, creating up to 150 retail licenses and countless other business opportunities for plant touching and ancillary companies. All in, at least 28 municipalities are in line to include some cannabis ballot initiatives. This fall, the largest cohort since California started regulating adult use in 2018. And so good news for these municipalities, but it's unfortunate that it's still such a small number of dispensaries, because California would benefit by adding at least 10 times that number and then some, probably, to properly supply the demand of 40 million people and help combat the illicit market. But any little steps in the right direction to help the legal, those in the legal industry right now currently stay afloat, the better ultimately. And so with that, we got a few more from normal on states. So Massachusetts court ruling may open the door for the mass expungement of prior cannabis convictions. So another positive ruling, the ruling in Commonwealth versus KW clarifies that a 2018 state law provides judges with limited leeway with respect to denying requests for cannabis-related expungement. So it makes it harder for them to deny expunging records. Rather, the court's opinion says that the intent of the law is to provide strong presumption in favor of expungement for petitioners who meet its requirements. So this new ruling reversed the decision of a municipal court judge who refused to grant a request to expunge a low-level cannabis conviction based upon his biased opinion that doing so is not in the best interest of justice overall. What horseshit. And so if no substantial countervailing concern is raised, judges must grant the petition for expungement. If you have to at least want to give the people the chance to change and improve and get better. Gosh, justices on the Supreme Court concluded. And so attorney Pauline Quarion, sorry for butchering that name, who argued the case before the court, said the ruling means that people with legitimate expungement requests will face fewer barriers to removing past convictions from their criminal records, as the courts should do so if they're functioning properly. And so just happy to highlight that's sort of the summary and takeaway. It's a very detailed and thoughtful decision that is going to help a lot of people. He said it will make the process of expungement much clearer and easier. So big win for those out of Massachusetts as well. While we got this one out of Spectrum Local News, just wanted to share this, not going to spend too much time on it, but apparently a claim that the retail cannabis stores on track to start opening in New York by the end of 2022. And these would be stores given to those harmed by the war on drugs that they get to open first. But we have nearly a year and a half after the Cannabis Regulation and Taxation Act was signed into law. Ridiculous how long it's taken. Christopher Alexander, executive director of the New York State Office of Cannabis Management, told Capital tonight that the office is working on licensing retailers for the legal cannabis market with a prioritization on small and medium businesses. Alexander said the first retailers are fully on track to open by the end of 2022, with more on the way in the new year. And so at this point in time, can I believe anything that this man says? Absolutely not. But I'm very happy that he reiterates this so that we can hold him accountable if he does not get this launched by the end of 2022, because there's no reason not to. It would benefit everyone in New York, especially those that voted for the Dems and have been lied to for the last year and a half and haven't been able to launch yet. So I do hope to be pleasantly surprised, especially because if New York could actually seriously get this done, this could be the sentiment shift and trend change that we've been waiting for a long, long time. And so lastly, with that, on to some snippets from investment firms. So take these with a grain of salt, but obviously these guys have a lot more access to information than we do. So leaving them here so you can pause to read, take it in, and hopefully help you make better and more timely investment decisions down the line. And so Todd Harrison shares this one, Cantor on New York Cannabis. So a lot in here you can pause to read. Not going to go through the whole thing, but we believe that the larger MSOs are in the process of discussing with the state regulator the right to play in the rec market. In our opinion, the carrot and the stick approach could go as follows. And so more if you wanted to read that. So this is Cantor and likely Pablo on what's happening in New York. Well, we've got this one from Dennis Rudolph, so thank you, Dennis, for sharing reasons for optimism in passing Safe Banking Act by Cowen. Even a light version, no listing on U.S. exchanges, etc., should provide confidence to cannabis investors and help catalyze the market. So reasons for optimism, you can pause to read to the bottom of this snippet down here, and then you can pause to read from we believe all the way down to any of those could become a vehicle to advance all the unfinished business, including a SAFE Act package. So obviously optimistic, but things to consider and worth noting. And so another one from Dennis. Thank you, Dennis, for sharing this one. Brief snippets from the Chicago Benzinga conference by Cantor. And so a lot in here, so you can pause to read as well. But investment summary, we continue to like the setup for the top MSOs, on safe passage, Senator Booker, election results effects, and what if no safe. So you can pause to read. Well, oh, this one's very difficult. Anyways, I'd recommend grabbing the link below, but is the current market phase cyclical or secular? Inflection points, unlock events, scale and being ready on industry consolidation, and how M&A play out among the tier 1 and tier 2 MSOs. Keep an eye on more M&A friendly states. So yeah, grab the link below if you wanted to read that, because that's probably way too small. New York State, so this is actually the snippet that I just shared earlier. Florida going rec, state operators, and then Europe snippet lastly down here. So you can pause to read, otherwise grab the link below. Well, we've got a few more, so thanks Todd for sharing. Jeffries on US cannabis, so not going to go through this whole one, but highlights from Benzinga Cannabis Conference, overall optimism around safe. So basically another one, but this version from Jeffries as opposed to Cantor, so you can pause to read. Well, I've got another one. Many smaller businesses are hanging on. Consumer trends not seeing any improvement over second quarter. Incumbents in New York happy to pay, but with guarantees. 280E unlikely to go away anytime soon. So again, just according to, who is this again? Jeffries, I believe. But yeah, you can pause to read for more information on their equity research. Well, we've got this one, AGP on U.S. cannabis, so thanks, Todd, for sharing this one. Another few snippets. So Benzinga's conference takeaways puts eyes on safe prospects. And so this is AGP, again, their version of the Benzinga conference takeaways, so you can pause to read. Well, more here. New adult use states coming online with New York in focus. That would be ideal if they can get something right after all this time. And state of the cannabis consumer. So a bit more information if you wanted to pause to read here. I wanted to share this one from Joe Greiser, so thank you for sharing this interesting story from Yahoo Finance. I'll put the link below, but CannabizTeam salary report predicts more than 100,000 cannabis jobs in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut by 2025. How could this not be a good thing? How can we not want to spread more awareness about this and try and normalize the cannabis industry sooner than later? Because it provides jobs, tax revenue, many good things to Americans that they need. What American in the right mind wouldn't think 100,000 or a million new American-made jobs, especially at this point in time, wouldn't be in the best interest of everybody? Am I right? The reality is that America needs the cannabis industry now more than ever. And so last few stories, this one interesting out of Canada, so thank you Deepak Anand for sharing this one. Some interesting facts here as it relates to veterans reimbursement of cannabis for medical purposes. And so this comes from a tweet from David Bro. VAC audit of healthcare benefits, cannabis for medical purposes as of April 2022, veterans.gc.ca. And so while this only applies to a small cohort in Canada, good to see more veterans getting access to a safer, non-addictive alternative that they need. So obviously this data could go a long way to arguing the benefits of legalizing for medical cannabis for veterans in the US, as 61% are being reimbursed 3 grams per day, 19% under 3 grams a day, and 20% over 3 grams a day, while it's only 11 healthcare practitioners are apparently prescribing almost 40% or 6,000 veterans in total. So it's a small concentration doing most of the cannabis education and providing it. And so obviously thank you to these 11 healthcare practitioners for the most part leading the way and having the courage to go against the establishment, the medical establishment that currently holds so much power. And so lastly, to summarize, increase of 660% in 2020 compared to 2015. So again, slow to see these results, but the data is in, and it's just very good to see more Canadians, at least veterans, getting access to a safer, non-addictive alternative. And obviously, we'd love for the U.S. to pick that up. Well, it should be much bigger news and should be, sprayed on more outlets to help combat the opioid epidemic. I'm happy to be the outlet that delivers this sort of good stuff to you. So last two stories come from two CEOs of U.S. cannabis companies. So thank you, TJ, for sharing this first one. The fact that Charles Bachtell from Cresco Labs believes we get some federal legislation by end of year is significant. And while I do agree, obviously we don't know what's going to happen, so plan accordingly for your own situation. But Charlie has been very conservative, weighing in on federal movement in the past. He is also active and connected in D.C. as the chairman of the National Cannabis Roundtable. And so this comes from a tweet from John Pletz. Cresco Labs CEO Charles Bachtell says it's more likely than not that we get some sort of federal cannabis reform by the end of the year at Benzinga conference in Chicago. And so while we've heard this before, again, take it with a grain of salt. It really doesn't mean much. It just means that basically the odds are a little bit more than 50%, which we could have said the odds were 50% last year because it was the first time that SAFE had ever been added to the NDAA. And so obviously it's either a 50% yes or no. And so just wanted to share this as at least Charlie, he's cautious, but he's cautiously optimistic. And so last one from Graham Farrar. Well, let's hope so. So we got another one. Cannabis Safe Banking Act closer to getting passed than we've ever been, Curaleaf founder says. And again, that's true. But obviously, if cannabis gets legalized in 3 years, every day until then is closer than we've ever been. And so while I share all this with you, the momentum is building, which is positive. But again, we don't control anything. It's ultimately up to Schumer. So plan accordingly for your own situation. But the link to this down below, so you can grab that if you wanted to watch it and check it out. But that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. And I really hope you got some value out of this episode. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoy this industry and learn something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos. And I will catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update. Have a great weekend, everybody.